All right. Welcome, everyone. We are going to be talking Web3 today. We have a bunch of great speakers. Our topic today is cross-chain gaming. Is that good or bad? Let's start with bringing on some intros. I'm going to start. So my name is Adam Kling, the CEO and founder of Fix Gaming. We created the CryptoFights project. We started early in 2018 trying to innovate blockchain gaming. It's a 1v1 strategy fighting game. We're currently on iOS and Google Play. And we also have a product called the Fix Gateway, which is a digital asset management platform for Web3 and Web2 items. Check it out. We also have Abel. Would you like to do a quick intro?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Abel Dantas. I'm the CTO of FYX Gaming. I've been working with Adam for quite a few years now. And we develop a game called CryptoFights and FYX Gateway. So our gateway, it's a platform that bridges the gap between Web 2 and Web 3. And in this space, we often just ramble on about Web 3, gaming, some degen talk, some skeptical talk sometimes. And Adam also runs some clips with quotes from people from the industry. And it's generally time well spent. And for us, it's a way to do some product discovery sometimes to see what other signals are out there from the rest of the ecosystem and spitball a few ideas. It's generally a good time. And if you're just listening in, enjoy.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we get a lot of good information here and a lot of people on the ground telling us what's going on, including Mikkel. I know you are out and about, so why don't you do a quick intro and tell us what you're about?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Mikkel. I've been working in Web3 for about 4 years now, about 2.5 of those years in gaming, previously as the co-founder of the launcher, and now I do some marketing things at Forgotten Playland. Social party game, super fun, just launched a couple weeks ago, and just excited to be here with you guys today. Excited to talk about cross-chain gaming.
Great, thank you. And Scott Herman, would you like to do a quick intro?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Scott Herman, co-founder of WagMe Games, real-time strategy game currently in beta, and we just released our anime trailer last week. It's pretty awesome. I'll pin it to the top of the space. Y'all can check it out. Excited to be here.
Great, thank you. Blue Collar Crypto, why don't you do an intro?
GM, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Travis, or Blue Collar Crypto. I go by either one. I do business development and BD over at Vaynar. We're an exciting new EVM-based L1. We just wrapped up our testnet campaign, and we'll be going mainnet here live, so stay tuned for the announcement on that. Happy to be here. Love the crypto fight spaces. I know I've been here a few times, and always awesome panels, always awesome discussion, and awesome speakers.
Awesome. Thank you for the love. Who's next? Dub Digital, welcome back.
GM. How you guys doing? My name is Dub Digital. I'm the head of PR over at PlayerChain, which is a cross-chain gaming infrastructure. We're going to be launching on Avalanche Subnet in a month or so. We have our testnet going right now. Just trying to lower the barrier entry for Web 2 builders and players, giving them APIs and toolkits to do it the right way so they can focus on creativity. But we're big believers on cross-chain gaming. So thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, this is a great topic for you then. Beast League, let's do an intro.
All right, let's go. Sorry, I just had to find the unmute button. Super happy to be here. It's Marcelo, head of community here at Beast League. We are a mobile sports game available on iOS and Android Play Store, mainly focused on basketball. Think of basketball with a twist. You get some superpowers, and it's a lot of fun. Super happy to be here. Excited for the conversation. Cross-chain gaming, good or bad? Excited to get into it, and super happy to share the panel with such amazing people. See some friends here, so super grateful to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Ruby Edelstein, would you like to do an intro?
Hello, everybody. I'm Ruby. I'm the co-founder and lead engineer of XP.NETWORK. We're an NFT multi-chain bridge, currently connected to around 25 chains, 8 non-EVM, and the rest are EVMs. Happy to be here, happy to discuss cross-chain. Thank you guys for having me.
Great, thank you. So why don't we go ahead and get started and open up this discussion. I think the first good question for this is just the whole premise of cross-chain. You know, when I started in this space, there was really, I think I would consider Ethereum was essentially kind of the 80% of the market. Like you would just think of Ethereum and everyone was on there, fees were low, and it was kind of a different feeling. There wasn't, it's kind of like when you go to the grocery store and there's, 100 different cereals to choose from. There was really just, one cereal and it all tastes good. So now we have all these different chains. We have chains that are essentially attracting games for grants, subsidies, basic money, and especially now they're trying to get kind of the big AAA games that think they're going to bring the users and the transactions to their chain. So what do you think the future is? I mean, I think where my mind is leaning is that we have probably, I don't know, it's a matter of time in my opinion, where all these different chains start to become boring. Obviously the scalability of a chain I think is going to be very, very important for success. Fees. So we just partnered with Scale, for example, and they're a gas-free chain. That's probably going to matter for players that, don't want to have to acquire the base currency, or, maybe you're going to have to do account abstraction and sponsor the gas and so on. So it might not be a big deal, but there's definitely going to be properties of each chain that might matter in terms of, players. But if you think about it in 5 years, is it going to be just boring? And is cross-chaining kind of maybe a misnomer where maybe they don't care what chain it's on? So I see a lot of hands up. I usually do a good job of this. So I'll start from the top. Mikkel, what do you think?
Yeah, I just think eventually it'll look something like credit cards. We have MasterCard, Visa, Amex, and then terminals, and they're all just going to get processed through wallets. I think we pay attention a lot in this space to what's going on with the chains, and like you said, there's a lot of incentives going around. I talked to Tezos last night at 11 p.m. who's making a big play into gaming now. If you're looking for grant money, go to them. They're handing it out like candy. And they're all competing, right? But I think we see them merge over time, and we have a couple big winners, and then they're all just contained in single wallets. Users don't care about what chain we're on. We're not talking about them nearly as much as we were. It's just more of something that we care about in this space, right? But it's not a consumer-facing issue.
Right. Dub Digital, what do you think?
Yeah, I think players don't care, and as the time goes on, it's just going to get less and less important. I've been in crypto for a while, and I don't really care. I just want to be able to jump to where I want to go with my funds, and then if it's in gaming, that's great. And then maybe I want to pop off into a meme coin, and that might be on different chains because different chains have different cultures. We like to think there might be a couple big winners, but in my mind, I think as we go along, no chain's going to be able to handle the amount of throughput and transactions this thing can really take on if there's really global adoption. So I think the only way to really do it is to connect them all together. And I think cross-chain gaming is just going to be a big part of that, because when you think about gamers, it's really just focused on fun. It's very, very associated culture-wise with the meme coin culture. Just want to have fun. That's what I want to focus on. I don't care about the technicals. So I just see it kind of working together.
All right, so let's dive into that. Do you think when we say cross-chain, does it mean that your game that's on Polygon needs to, I'm trying to think of the right word, like an asset from one chain needs to be usable on another chain? Because obviously that means, we're bridging assets from one chain to another. Do we have almost like attestation solutions? You know what I'm saying? Like, are we saying that, or is it more, like you said, I just want to be able to have the frictionless experience of multi-chain? So if, game number one is on chain number one, and then game number two is on chain number two, and it's just like I can just use either, and it's no big deal. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I think what's going to be obviously bridge technology has come a long way since the beginning, where it basically didn't exist, and now we have data bridges. I think that's going to be the future. Not necessarily wrapping assets more or less, but bridging data. And I know that could be complex when it comes to NFTs and assets like that. It's not all the way worked out, but I think we're closer than ever been. So bridging data over, at least being able to bridge funds over, NFTs make it a little more complicated, but I think the seamless playing between chains and making it frictionless is where we need to go.
All right. Beastly, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, these are some really great points. At the end of the day, I think, especially when it comes to gaming, I don't think anybody really cares. We just want to play some games, guys, So it's like, absolutely. I think, at the same time, different chains offer different stuff. I get it. Definitely important to look at. But, there's two ways of looking at it. I think I've always said that I think the future is multi-chain. I think we're definitely going in that direction. At the same time, I don't think we're really going to be looking at the chains, right? Especially in a multi-chain world where the benefits are, crossing over and, all these chains are working together. It won't really matter which chain you launch on, especially if you're able to still use that chain down the line, amongst different chains at the same time. So there's a lot there. At the end of the day, I don't really know if it'll matter in a couple years, right? Where I think we're just looking for quality games and the experience for the player, at the end of the day. So whether it's on Avalanche, IMX, Scale, Solana, the list goes on, right? And we see it already today. So many different games are being built on different chains. Solana's doing its thing. We're seeing Avalanche. We're seeing so many cool chains, IMX, etc. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And we're already seeing people using multiple chains for different purposes right now already. So I think.
Well, let's keep thinking, right? So if the chains become generic, then it almost seems like there is incentive for each chain to spend a bunch of money back into the application or content layer of their business. Meaning, we need it almost reminds me of like AOL Online, where they would send, the CD-ROMs everywhere to try to get them on the network, and then, I guess like different, I can't come up with an example, but basically I guess Netflix is probably a good example, right? Like, they get a bunch of subscribers paying, fees and revenue and all that, but they have essentially a responsibility to constantly bring new content for them to justify the existence of Netflix, right? Because they're going to run out of money and people are going to cancel if there's no content to watch. So it almost seems like that's the natural evolution that you're painting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really painted a good picture with that, and especially using Netflix. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said my point. I'd love to hear what other people have to say to that as well.
Yeah, Mindless has had his hand up. What do you think? I know you didn't do an intro, so if you'd like to do that, go ahead.
I appreciate it. No, it's all good, man. We all know each other by now anyway. I don't think I have to kind of repeat it. I want to draw a parallel. First of all, I think this is a great topic, a great question. You've polarized it beautifully by saying, is it good or bad? I love that. I'm going to try and draw some parallels to things that I've looked at and considered previously, sort of in my youth and whatnot. So I look at the chain ecosystem very much like we had the console wars of the year 2000, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to maybe even just 5 years ago. You had this whole rivalry between the PlayStation ecosystem, the Xbox ecosystem, the Nintendos, and a few others which fell apart and don't exist today, and the PC ecosystem. And these were all siloed, built heavily internally with their own sort of parameters, their own benefits, weaknesses, hardware differences, software differences, building kits. You had the rise of Unity and Unreal, and you had all these custom engines built natively within these sort of consoles and platforms. And the audiences too, very heavily dependent, defensive, patriotic to their cores and to their own sort of platforms. And you see that in the blockchain space just the same, because ultimately it's the network effect of people that make these things how they are and what they are. At the moment you have proponents of ETH maxis, you have even the rise of BTC maxis that are now talking about bringing gaming on-chain, and it has to be fully on-chain, and BTC is the best network to do it, and whatever. You see the rise of Solana, Sui, BNB, all natively with their own respective communities and quirks and benefits and weaknesses. So I think the comparison from the console wars to the blockchain wars, I think that's a good term I can coin, is very similar. But interestingly, what happened is it worked incredibly well for the first 20, 30 years. No problem. And it's still working well. I think it's perfectly fine to build natively siloed in one of these ecosystems, just as it is fairly feasible to have an incredibly successful game on PlayStation only. It's fine. You don't have to go PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC. Mobile all in one. It's perfectly feasible. But you are seeing now cross-platform play, cross-console play. That's a thing. It's been a thing for nearly 10 years, and it's becoming increasingly more so. So I don't think it's right or wrong, good or bad. I suppose it's down to perhaps what were your objectives as a game studio or publisher when you first launched. Did you have that as an end goal, to tap into all of these various ecosystems? I think that's perhaps a thing to consider.
Yeah, that's a great point and a good analogy with the console wars. And I think it's very accurate in the sense that, like a Immutable X, a gaming change or Merit Circle, and they want to have content and their business model is users that spend money and then they make fees or essentially, or even create like basically a secondary trading market for their base currency that they can sell into. And I think it's actually really, really interesting, which it kind of leads me to believe that these chains' business models will have to be kind of like a Netflix where they're going to have to spend money on content, which is actually really exciting if it happens that way for especially a lot of the game projects here or just content that we create, that they're going to be, basically paying for content like Netflix. Scott, you've had your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Hey, thanks, man. Really loved everything you had to say, Mindless. I mean, as soon as you said console wars, I immediately now have to go watch the 3-episode series of South Park because that was just the best. First of all, this space is recorded, so I'm going to go tattletale on all of you, and I'm going to tell all the chains that you don't care. And I'm going to scoop up all those deals because I'm going to tell them how much I actually do care about being on specific chains. So there's that. People, it doesn't matter what chain you're on. You guys are 100% correct. Okay. In fact, something that I've been talking about lately is that if we want mass adoption in Web 2, we first have to have mass adoption in Web 3. You can't have games that are on only specific chains because now all of a sudden you can't gain as many players as you want to get in Web 3 because they don't want to make a new wallet or they don't want to move over. So what we've done at WAGMI Games is we've actually built out a back-end bridging system that allows players to battle each other no matter what chain they're on, and then they can also trade cards with each other. So that has to be there. That is the next step moving forward. And it's one for mass adoption, but also number two, getting back to the console wars thing that Mindless was talking about. I don't know if you guys have heard of this game called Helldivers 2, but this game is like the most talked about game. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves playing it. And then all of a sudden, I think this week or last week, they're telling everybody they have to go make a Sony account to continue to play, even if you're on PC. And what they did was when the game first came out, like way at the bottom of the user agreement or whatever, they're like, this is a trial period. You can still play on PC, but you're going to have to make a Sony account. And so everybody who was playing on, I think, Steam on their computer, all of a sudden had to make a Sony account. Like, if you look at the chart, their numbers dropped instantly. People are pissed. They don't want to play the game anymore because PC players don't want to deal with that BS. They just don't want to. They love the game, but they do not want to make a Sony account, even though it would take them 2 minutes to do it, right? So these types of things are important because, we're bringing WAGMI Defense to base first. Maybe base wallet holders don't want to make a wallet anywhere else because they don't trust anyone else. They just want to stay on base. So let them stay there and let them be able to interact in their own way. And I think what's going to happen in the future is a lot of what you were just saying, CryptoFights, these chains are going to have to come up with ways to really differentiate themselves from each other, whether it's other services they offer, better marketplaces, right? Things like that. So I think we're going to start to see a transformation coming from these spaces in what else they offer to help, continuously grow their gaming sections or their markets or their player bases versus just, hey, build your game on our chain and blah, blah, blah. You guys are right. No one cares. What else is out there?
Blue Dollar, I think you had your hand up. And Spicy Capital, thanks for joining us. After Blue Dollar, I'd like for you to do an intro and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of, I think great points were made. And at the end of the day, the blockchain is just the tech layer. And I feel like, especially in Web3 gaming, we're kind of trying to appeal and need to appeal to two different markets, like the Web3 market and the traditional player market, because you really need that traditional player market to be like sustainable and have the user base and everything else, because Web3 just isn't quite big enough yet to really do it on its own. But you also need to appeal to your, Web3 community that is growing and we feel like is adapting, and more the market is kind of moving and hopefully shifting into that direction where they'll, start to really kind of pick up on a lot of those more Web3 kind of degen, whatever you may call it, kind of benefits to these games. And I think multi-chain is very important because, you have your Web3 audience that may be just maxis or just comfortable with a particular chain and they don't want to venture out to another chain. They don't want to learn another chain. Maybe they got burned on another chain and they don't want to go back, whatever it may be, and your market's still open to them. When you look at like Fortnite, you know, they're available on Nintendo, on Xbox, on PlayStation, on PC, on your tablet, wherever you have a screen, Fortnite is there to play. You know, Roblox and Minecraft and all of them, they do so well, but they make it a seamless experience. I don't need to, you know, if I download Fortnite on my Nintendo Switch, I just need to sign in with my Fortnite credentials. I don't need to, like, you know, side load an Xbox login or some Steam login or something else, because the infrastructure's there to make it seamless and make it just feel like what the market traditionally knows, signing in with your username and password. And I think that's very key and important, where we can tap into all those markets, but it still feels very one platform for the gamer at the end of the day. But in the back end, we have these kind of tools and everything that can make that multi-chain seamless.
Right. Spicy Capital, would you like to do a quick introduction and give us your thoughts on the topic?
Yo, what's up? Thanks for having us as a guest. Always a vibe to be on Spaces. Always good to see some familiar faces as well, man. Shout out to the WagMe Games crew. Always good to see you guys in Spaces and Mindless and everyone else. Man, this is a dope vibe. I joined a little bit late, so I actually don't know what the question is. So yeah, man, I just heard some dope answers, but I don't want to just answer randomly and repeat anyone. So,
okay.
We're giving out seed phrases, so it's like this 12-word thing.
Yeah. What's your hold wallet?
And this is the guy that's gonna help onboard everyone to Web3. I'm telling you now, man. The banner this guy has is the best. But before the question, yeah, we're Spicy Capital, VC fund in the crypto space. We are focused on infra projects, so infra in gaming, infra in AI, deep in Bitcoin. So we're across a vast amount of Web3. But we're not just focused on certain sectors. Our main thing is infrastructure. So if a sector or a project is working on bringing or making infrastructure easy in the space, then we definitely want to be involved.
Okay, so question for you, Spicy. So we were talking about like the different chains giving out grants and subsidies to attract games or content and thus users to their chain. What are you seeing, or are you seeing that across, you know, the different chains like, you know, Immutable, Polygon, and so on? Do you have any kind of insight into what's happening on the ground?
So you mean as in,
like, for example, like, Immutable X, doing either milestone grants or just straight up grants to come on and do an exclusive launch on their chain, like Shrapnel, for example, only being on one chain.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I see that as kind of cool, I guess, when chains do that. But I think chains do that to do like a test, because the grants that they give out, it's not like they're really, you know, it's not really like affecting them. If they give a grant to building a chain and throw some money at it as well, and usually the grants are like what, 50, 60 grand, maybe max I've seen a grant at is like 100. So if those are usually the grants, there's no real loss for them in a way. So I kind of feel like they do it to just test if the project's actually going to work, which I'm not against. I'm not against that, but I don't feel like that is really helping the project in a way, because let's say, for example, we invest in a project. Obviously, we're not doing grants. We throw investments in, but when we do that, it's in our best interest that the project does very, very well. So we would help as much as we can with the marketing and anything marketing or community related. We'll go guns blazing. So I think grants are pretty cool, but I think the thing behind grants is they do it to just kind of see if the project's going to work out. It's like a test. And I think in the long run, grants are kind of overplayed in my opinion.
Interesting. Mindless, what are your thoughts?
Hey, thanks. Sorry, just lost the mute button for a minute. I want to draw another analogy based on this question, and it fits into my earlier model, and that's with respect to the way, I mean, at least in my living memory, I saw Xbox and Microsoft do this because I was old enough to pay attention. But looking back at it now, Sony did the same, and that was with, let's just talk about Microsoft because all of the others did the same. That was grant programs, allocations, support, tech support, developers, the helping game studios specifically launch natively on the Xbox, also taking equity stakes within these game studios and startups, helping them with user acquisition, marketing, brand outreach, all of that stuff. This is exactly what these chains are doing. They're allocating a little bit of capital. Some of them are also taking equity stake in these protocols that are launching. It may be small, nominal 1 or 2%, but they're definitely doing it. We saw Sony do this, definitely. We see Sony and Microsoft respectively owning IP, owning gaming IP in so many different ways, not just characters and artistic IP, but tons of others. And we're also seeing blockchains do this. So I think, again, it's a very interesting analogy. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So you're financing growth in your ecosystem. You're assisting them by using your leverage that you have as a sort of large player in the space. And then you're also taking an equity stake in that. So it's a double win, in my opinion, if any one of these does end up landing really well or becoming a massive sort of studio within a particular ecosystem. And I think, interestingly, like you see, in fact, every chain does this, a chain that has a foundation. So Ethereum did this. You have the Solana Foundation doing this. You see Tezos doing this, notably. You see Sui doing this. You see the BNB ecosystem do this. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. One other thing, I had something on my mind I wanted to bring up specifically related to this. It will come back to me. Sorry, I'll jump back on.
Cool, no problem. Blue Collar, what do you got?
Yeah, I just want, I really agree with what Spicy said with the grants tend to be a bit overplayed anymore. You know, we experienced ourselves, we were on 6 different chains before we created our own L1, and it was so often you found hey, we're going to give you $50,000 or we're going to give you, X, Y, and Z to come over here and build. And you would get there, the grant money would run out, and it was just kind of good luck, you're on your own, and there wasn't a whole lot of support. And we still hear about it from a lot of chains. I won't mention any names, but you see projects leaving some of these chains after signing these big deals just 12 months ago. There was a big one where at GDC, not this year but last year, a large project announced a big integration with the chain, and then 11 months later they're leaving the chain because they just don't have the support. And I think for real longevity, real sustainability, it takes so much more than just money. And money is great, but there's so much more value in those connections and that support, having the tech support teams there, having access to exchanges, to KOLs, to, developers, to smart contract auditors, to whatever it may need that these projects need. Because a lot of them don't have those resources. They don't know where to turn, or they don't have a way to kind of open the door and get a conversation started with some of these. So they're kind of left in the dark, and the grant's great until the money runs dry and you don't have any more support. So that's one thing we're doing at Vaynar, is really trying to create that support system where we have access to all these different channels and angles that we can connect people with and stuff. And I think it's a lot more valuable long term for sustainability versus a one-time grant, then carry on your way now.
Mindless, it looks like you've remembered what you're going to say, so go ahead.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Sorry. It was a larger point again. As much as we like to think that everything should be cross-chain and that chains or consoles should strive to share everything, I think there's a certain case here which says that the opposite is also fairly important to make sure that some of these things, at least the really, really big hitters, stay within their respective ecosystems. The best sort of example I can give of this is of, let's say, Microsoft essentially acquiring or taking a huge stake in Halo. Right? There's no way in hell they'll ever allow that to go over to a Nintendo ecosystem or a PlayStation ecosystem, because that's IP and ownership that's very specific to the Microsoft ecosystem. It's massive for them. It's an edge that they have, and they'll be silly to just give that away into some of these other ecosystems. And similarly, Sony will do this, and similarly, you'll never see a Mario game on a PlayStation or an Xbox for good reason. So I think there's a strong case to say that, hey, a lot of these chains, when they're focusing on building something internally, it's perfectly okay for them to be very defensive of it and make sure that it stays only within their ecosystem. And if you want it, well, you got to buy an Xbox, you got to buy a PlayStation, you got to buy a Nintendo.
So this brings up an interesting question. If it's like Blue Dollar, it sounds like you are on a bunch of different chains. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to create my own chain. Well, if the barrier to entry to do that is low, I mean, pretty much you can create your own chain now, I guess, because it's all open source, right? Or L2s, L3s, whatever you want to call it. doesn't that lead to more fragmentation of the network that it's on? And if so, doesn't that bring us, I feel like, full circle back to where we started in the Web 2 space? All right, Mindless, what do you got?
Yeah, this is a good one. I'll say this. I think all competition is good competition. Just let this play out and the best ecosystems will win and the network effects will dominate. And that's just the natural order of things.
All right, Blue Dollar, what do you got?
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that point. And, you know, I always like to say that there's a big difference, and you can see it in a lot, whether it's a chain, whether it's a project, whether it's a idea, a business, whatever it is. Are you creating a solution and then trying to find a problem for that solution, or do you see a problem and then you're trying to create a solution? You know, with us, it was more than just not having, you know, we didn't want to necessarily create an L1 at first. There just wasn't, for some of the problems we were facing and some of our big brand partners that we were working with, that was causing hesitation for them. There was problems that they had that there wasn't a current solution for. So I think, you know, when it comes to like spinning up an L2 and L3 and L1 and L37, whatever it may be, if there's a problem that you recognize and you can create a solution for it, then go for it. If it's like, hey, let's just do this so we have our own, then yeah, you can start to get into that fragmentation, and you're going to start to create a whole lot of problems because people are going to start looking at TVL, transaction volume, all these other kind of things that go into it, token price, all that stuff that like we don't want to like have to focus on as builders and developers and stuff, but you need to once you start taking those angles. So, you know, I'd say to that, like, you know, if there's problems out there or some problems that there's not a solution for currently and you can create that solution, then do it. If there's already a solution to your problem, look for ways to integrate these other chains, these other products, these other partners into what you're doing, because it can save you a ton of headache. It can save you a ton of overhead. You let the, you know, aces in their places, let them focus on this piece of the pie and do what they do best while you focus on another piece of the pie, and you're not having to dilute yourself or, you know, go on a massive hiring spree or have a whole lot more overhead to manage in that way.
Dub Digital, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that's really why we were attracted on Avalanche and launching our own Avalanche subnet. It's your own chain. It's able to handle the throughput and the efficiency, but still part of a larger aggregate chain, right? I think that's one of the going to be the future, especially for gaming, right? Because you don't want to be like tied down by another dApp that has nothing to do with your game. You want to be able to make sure that it's sustainable, it can run, it's smooth, but also get the security and the pretty much the attention that the larger chain brings. So I think that's something that's going to be raising in popularity, especially in the gaming sector. But yeah, I mean, that's totally a case, you know, going to do your own chain by yourself, it's not that attractive. The metrics aren't really there. I think this is a good way to get around that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me of what happened with Ronin and Axie Infinity and kind of the big hack is if for example there is a unsolved need, you know, kind of thinking of you, blue collar, that you know, you create a chain, you get successful, you have, you know, assets, let's say NFTs, tokens, whatever, that are starting to trade on that network. You are essentially the stewards of, and this is the value that is kind of being the commerce that's being conducted on your chain. And so if like you screw up, like you know, forgetting the name, Sky Mavis did, and you know, you had a huge hack, you know, so I think the risk of creating your own chain definitely is underappreciated, but at the same time, maybe, you know, you could literally clone and take on the risk profile of another chain. But it's an interesting kind of thought experiment that if we, as a game studio, so if you think you're Ubisoft or any of these, you know, big things that have a huge portfolio of IP and games, you say, you know what, I got, I don't know, 100 million players that I can bring into this ecosystem. You know, I can create like a clone of a Mutable X or something like that and pretty much dominate the market. You know, but now they have to kind of consider the risk of, well, you know, if I have, I don't know, billions of dollars being traded on this network and we screw up, you know, they're probably going to get sued. I would imagine you'd get sued, even if it's, you know, I don't know if it'll happen, but it seems to bring that, you know, the fragmentation of the industry, like there's incentive to do this. And it's very unclear to me if it's a big player is going to come in and just be like the Sony PlayStation or the Microsoft Xbox chain, where you want to go there because they're going to bring in the user base. Maybe that's a good question for the panel, because in earlier spaces we talked about ground up or top down, and a lot of people I think agree that it's going to be a ground up kind of evolution for Web3. Is that we're going to users are still going to kind of come over to the indie smaller projects, and it's going to get to a tipping point to where the entrenched players are going to have to adapt or die. Versus, they come in and, like you said, dominate like a Ubi chain. And does anyone have any thoughts on kind of how you think the evolution will occur in the space, especially if we have, thousands or hundreds of thousands of different chains per project? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I can maybe build a little bit upon the metaphor that Mindless was talking about. And if we look at that era of the console wars, I think there was this tendency. So in the beginning, independent projects that launched within those platforms were much less funded than later. So in the 80s, 90s, independent projects on those platforms didn't get as much sort of buy-in from the platforms themselves than they later did. And I think this is because the platforms that succeeded weren't the ones that had the consoles with the best chips or with the best hardware or through output or technical specs or whatever, although that's one aspect. The ones that succeeded were the ones that had the best games. And having the best games means, in some extent, not totally, but in some extent, funding the right projects. And that's what they did. So in the 90s and later, they increased the investments. So maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe maybe this chain war is really going to be a content war to bring, when I say content, I mean maybe owning assets on specific chains. So it's going to be fought at the app level probably more than because this chain is faster or slightly different fees or whatever. I think
be liquidity too. Basically, I think I saw a blurb about Pixels that's on Ronin that there's just massive amounts of trading going on, which obviously generates fees and revenue. That could also affect potentially where you go as well. But that also leads to the argument of aggregation too, right? And then, for example, if these chains say, well, we want your content, your IP exclusive, well, you're going to have to pay up, right? Because why wouldn't I just get them all? Be on all the chains, get all the ecosystems involved. So you're going to have to kind of pay, and whether that's investment or co-marketing and so on. Scott, what are you thinking?
Yeah, great points, everybody. I really resonated with a lot of stuff you were saying too, Abel. So what I think is that right now there's plenty of chains, right? There's plenty of chains to choose from. Pick a chain to get on that you guys think works best for the game that you're trying to build right now. We're all gamers here. We're all creators here. I think what's going to happen as we move forward is that a new chain is something that's going to be birthed from a need that game has. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, once your game is already successful and you're trying to expand on that universe, you're going to know where your bottlenecks are. And at that point, you're going to be able to figure out what you need for the chain for your game to be successful on. So right now, there's plenty of chains. We're going to probably still see more chains. But if you're just coming out of the gate with a new blockchain with new technology, I don't think there's enough games out there right now that can make use of all of that. So you're going to have to see what works best for you now. But as these games evolve and become more successful and the ecosystems grow and they want interoperability, there might be a chance for them to create their own blockchain and it makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely see it being more or maybe sooner in the future world that the aggregation or the cross-chain compatibility could be very interesting, because it just I've used this to death, this example, but of the internet. If anyone's old enough to remember BBSs where you would dial in, it's really old school. those were essentially kind of how I feel a little bit that blockchain feels like, in that your application kind of utilizes a blockchain, which is kind of like a database, which kind of is like a network. But we also have these kind of wallets that you can kind of switch networks really easily, and so it almost like it's like a quick switch BBS system right now. And so it seems like the next evolution is, well, let's just aggregate them all into one, and then I just use Chrome. And then I just type, then HTTP comes out, and then now we can kind of get into all the servers through kind of one universal protocol or something like that. It just seems that, all of these different chains, I think scalability is going to definitely be a factor for any application or game that's successful. But I think Axie really had this problem when they just started growing like crazy. And I don't even know how Pixels is doing. I haven't kind of seen. There's just more stuff going on. It's hard to keep up. Where the amount of transactions and the throughput of the chain will start to matter to be able to handle that. Because if anything is that successful, then it's going to break, and that's a huge kind of risk to that project. But so I feel like kind of validated in the way that, where Fixed Gaming is kind of looking at that cross-chain world and kind of trying to understand how games can work within that future, because it's hard to see. It's funny, Mikhail, you mentioned Tezos. I'm actually going to write that down. That if we can basically be, I think, was it Blue Collar? You said that you were on 6 different chains at once. Right. So, I feel like, why don't we all just do that? So Mikhail, actually, you haven't talked in a while. I'm actually curious of your thoughts on this discussion.
Oh God, I've been like multitasking, so now I feel horrible. You're saying like you think like the question is basically, should we all just be on all the chains?
Yeah,
it's will stop giving us grants, right?
All these different chains, and do you pick one or do you just use them all?
Well, I think, you're only going to get the grants if you're going exclusive, at least for certain amounts of time. I think it's so tough to integrate with every single one of these chains and have different, like, onboarding methods, right? Like, different wallets, different connections, like, training your staff to, like, help onboard people from all these different routes. I think you just kind of need to pick one and stick with it. Maybe 2 if you're on, like, an obscure chain and then you want something a little more mainstream or EVM compatible. Like, I can see a world where that works in a game, but I think that if you just have every chain, I think you're killing yourself with kind of technology and onboarding issues.
Interesting. If it wasn't I guess a big development cost or labor cost, would it be a no-brainer for you?
I just don't know. Like, I try to think about it like, okay, if I had my cell phone and I could have every provider on my cell phone, like, I don't know. I think I'd have to think through this a little bit.
That's actually a really good analogy.
Because like there'd be some coverage and some. I don't know. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, like the cost, like I'm on Cricket, which is basically AT&T sublease, I guess. And so you got Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and why don't I think is it Google? Google has that product. I can't remember the name of it. The Google phone where you could put the eSIM in and basically use their network. And I don't know if they network switch based on like where you are and what coverage you need and maybe like the roaming rates and all that. So basically you're always optimized for the, the best signal and the cheapest rate. That's kind of cool if it doesn't exist, by the way. But, that's a really good analogy to kind of think about this is, you're using your phone. Your phone's the computer. It kind of runs the applications, and the network is kind of the communication part of it. And if you think, the blockchain is almost that. We have a way to communicate, to do payments and kind of other application communication. What is the need for kind of these different chains like Scale? Like I said, no gas. It's kind of subsidized by the developer. You have, Bitcoin SV, or you have Polygon that could be like really cheap, but maybe less used. So there's less, liquidity in kind of the trading markets. And so there's kind of all these different properties that could be really relevant. So it's a very interesting question for me on I guess like where would you want to kind of call home, or why not call everything home? So it's a good question. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Maybe Beast League, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I've been multitasking as well. Can you just repeat the last
Everyone,
piece?
you need to stop. You need to focus 100% on this. Retweet the space. Like, undivided attention here. I mean, come on. Cool.
Only one of us can admit that at a time, Marcelo. Not
Okay,
two.
fair enough. Retweeted a space already an hour ago, so we're good on that piece. Just
Like
want
being on X because you have all your feed to look at. This is really an addiction, guys. Okay, like it's just there's so much stuff going on, and Twitter Spaces is supposed to be where you like pay attention. So
Let's turn this into an intervention.
yeah, I know. Blue collar, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is for the business side and not necessarily consumer facing side. Like, I don't care if when I go on a website, if it's hosted by AWS or Google or whatever it is, I just like go onto the website because it works and I need to do whatever I need to do on it. And so like, I think a lot of that kind of discussion is more like a business angle. Like, does it open you up to, different technology, a different liquidity, a different XYZ, a different market, whatever that may be. But for the consumer facing side, it just needs to be, at the end of the day, what you're wanting to do, the game you're wanting to play, the task you're trying to complete, the whatever. I have never once in my life looked at a website and seen how it is hosted. I've never once in my life swiped my MasterCard when I bought my gas and checked to see how the transaction was processed. I just go to do what I need to do and I do it. And I let the business of MasterCard decide how it's best for them to process that transaction or route that or whatever they need to do. I just care that it works. So I think a lot of that kind of comes down to more business decision as opposed to like what the consumer actually knows, cares, or even thinks about.
But you think the example you use,
I think we all need to just drop some love for blue collar, dropping just absolute fire at this whole space. So let's all
love you, Scott.
I was going to push back actually, because you use in your example a MasterCard, and you don't care how MasterCard processes, but you had to possess the MasterCard to use. And to me, that's like the app in our analogy here, right? Is the app kind of demands what rails or network you use, or can demand it.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I only have my MasterCard because that's what like Bank of America gave me. If they would have gave me a Visa, I'd be using the Visa.
Right,
like I didn't.
The money, right?
Yeah, it's just like a way to spend my money, and that's all I care about. It's like I want to spend my money however I can do it. That's like the easiest, and whatever you give me to do it, like I'll do it.
Mindless, what are you thinking?
Couple of thoughts. So out loud, a friend to all is a friend to none. That's a very old quote by Aristotle, meaning that if you end up being friendly or friends with most people, everything under the sun, you don't form deep, meaningful relationships with any one individual for too long or in any meaningful way. And I think if you're a game studio in the space, you should put yourself first. And it's okay to build specifically and exclusively in one ecosystem somewhere if your objective is to be incredibly successful, and then decide where you want to go next. Think of this. These chains need you more than you need them, all of them. It's the same for absolutely every single one. And there's nothing to suggest that if you become incredibly successful, you can't go and launch your own. You absolutely can. There's no reason why you can't, especially if you find out that you've outgrown the ecosystem you're within. I think that's something I'd actually like to see more of going forward. I'd like to see some larger competition with these networks in terms of the games that were built on them, moving off of them, taking all of that sort of liquidity, player, user base, value capture with them. I think that's competition I'd like to see in the space. And lastly, I think when you look at oh God, I'm really mixing my thoughts up today. I'll come back to this. I'm sorry. I think I'm also multitasking.
Because you're mindless. Got him!
We got jokes, man.
Yeah, I think he made a good point though about so at Forgotten Playland we decided to go exclusively with Hyperplay because we did want to build a meaningful relationship with them. They've given us tons of marketing support. They've run Twitter ads for us, right? Like if we were going on every single launcher and spreading ourselves thin, we wouldn't be getting any of that. In fact, some launchers wanted to actually charge us to come on their platform. That's part of the reason we selected to go with Hyperplay. So yeah, I think there is a lot of value in building those deeper relationships and co-marketing and doing so in a meaningful way instead of splitting your player base between a bunch of different teams and launchers.
I think Mindless has remembered. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes, Mikkel, thank you. That was definitely it. You triggered my memory somewhere. So You look at one other great example is Steam. Look at where they are now and where they started. It started off as a game, Half-Life, and then spun off a few decades later into arguably one of the largest players in the gaming space, at least for the PC side of things, now moving over into console and other things. That was a game. It was a gaming studio. It was a gaming startup that did so incredibly successful and then captured all of that value and spun it off into something else. I want to see more of that in the Web3 space, and it's perfectly fine to build on ETH natively, do incredibly well, and then go and spin off your own layer one somewhere, and take all of that capture with you. No qualms against that, and I think we should actually see that. And maybe there's a use case to say that perhaps some of the largest layer one solutions we're going to see are going to come from independent small game studios today who will go on to become the Valves and the epic, Fortnites of the next decade. And it's starting right here in groups like this one with folks like you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think we are kind of starting to see that. I think especially with the spasms in the Web 2 gaming industry and the layoffs and all that is these veterans are starting to think, well, you know what? Can I just go raise a bunch of money to, for my game studio that's, now in air quote Web3 and kind of create that. And also, I think my 2 cents is, we had a space and it might have been you, Mindless, but, we were talking about basically the template for how, like a successful operation of a game. And we, used the reference of the free to play. I think it was Clash of Clans or something like that. That everyone's kind of against it. It didn't seem like it was going to work. And then all of a sudden we have someone that figures it out. They figured the puzzle out. They templated it and, everyone obviously sees the success. The, kind of the early majority says, okay, we now have case studies and references and we can kind of look at it and see it with our own eyes about how they did it. They study it. And I studied like the Axie system and then, you start to get the kind of the clones of that. To kind of capitalize on that template. And that's kind of what I think is yet to be seen with Web3. Abel and I were kind of brainstorming the other day about just some really far out game ideas that seem really perfect for Web3 that has not been done yet. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love the innovation that we can create with Web3 that in Web2 it'd be like, who cares? Who absolutely cares about this idea on Web2? But on Web3 it becomes exciting. And I think that's kind of where Web3 can shine is the innovation, and I hope we kind of continue to do that. So I'm going to segue into our second segment and invite our second panel of speakers on. Everyone give a round of applause for our panel. Thank you for coming. Please retweet and post on this space so we can kind of do some recaps, and we're also going to do some recap speakers of what you said today in our feed. So appreciate it. I'm going to go to our little intermission, and we'll be right back.